In this episode, we delve into some practical tips on how to improve your relationships. And we've talked a lot about pathological relating. And in this episode, we get into some of what it looks like to be in a healthy relationship and some of the things that we all love about our own relationships and what we observe to be true about relational health. Thanks for listening.
Well, I think first it's, Marty, just recognizing the pattern themselves. You know, like sometimes people don't consciously know that there is a pattern. I think it's easy for us because we look at it in such an analytical way. I don't think that it's every time somebody gets close to leaving, we have a huge blowout fight, then we make up. I think it's subconscious, but I don't think people always pay attention to that part. So I think it's first not just immediately trashing the relationship and thinking, okay, it's just done. Let's try a new pattern, right? And for people, maybe it is that you need to end the relationship. So I think, when we're talking about in terms of addiction, if you do, find yourself removing yourself from the relationship, I think a lot of it is a lifestyle change. You can't go back to the same bars, the same restaurants. You can't involve yourself in the same sort of social situations that you used to with this person. Because I think people tend, once they successfully get out of a relationship, they end right back in the same sort of one because they keep doing the same things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The things something that occurred to me is like really in mental health with anything, like what do people do? Well, how do you affect change in somebody? Well, you help them find the most obvious thing in their immediate environment that they're willing to address. Maybe not the big elephant in the room because they're not ready, but what's the thing now that they're willing to address? And maybe it is, okay, wait a second. Maybe the action is just considering telling yourself the truth about the patterns that I'm engaged in. Maybe asking someone that I trust with more experience to kind of speak into my life, maybe reading, maybe just saying, hey, I don't want to break up, but I do need a few days here to kind of search my soul. What are the little things that somebody is willing to do that you can help them identify? So you're not saying, hey, you need to, like you say, trash this. You need to go now. You need to cut it off. So that's not fair. And some of these relationships that are volatile in the beginning can turn into long-term, healthy, loving relationships. It's possible. Oftentimes they're going to stay. Some level of volatility will survive. But some people like that. Hell, it's great for the bedroom.
Yeah, and kind of going off of what you said, Marty, I try to help the client simplify things. So instead of having 10 fights about 10 different things, okay, you're mad at him because he didn't put the dishes away when you asked. You're mad that he didn't call you when he was going to be late for a meeting. Let's look at what the underlying thing is there. It's not about the dishes. It's not about the fact that he didn't call you. You don't feel respected. Mm-hmm. Like you didn't matter enough for him to do what you asked. You didn't matter enough for him to give you a thought to call you. So instead of fighting 10 battles, let's address that one issue.
It's never about what it's about, is it?
Never.
It's the surface argument is always representing something deeper.
And that goes to what Gottman would call negative affect override, right? There is that something deeper, and it's sort of like trying to grow something in bad soil. Sometimes when I'm perfectly happy with my wife, if she comes in late, I'm like, oh, did something happen? If it's been going terribly and there's something else going on, it's not, in my head, just my internal, monologue is not, oh, did you have an eventful day? Did something fun happen? It's, oh, you awful person. Like, you knew I was making dinner. How could you possibly?
Right. This means you don't care.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And I think that's where couples fall into trouble is because we may address the issue of, helping around the house, but something else will creep up that's the same underlying tone. And so you feel, we're right back where we started. I still feel the same way. We're still having troubles. Why are we still having troubles? I thought we were working on things.
Yeah, that's the other thing. People don't have a realistic expectation on how long it takes to see improvement in a relationship. Even though you said sorry and you had sex and you're feeling good about everything, you're going to have some version of this fight 300 more times maybe before you really fully get it and see your role in it and begin to make some meaningful change. It takes a while, and it's okay. And it doesn't mean you're not sorry. It's kind of like, I'll now that I'm a little bit healthier than I used to be, sometimes I'll get in a fight, and I'll be hit with like, well, you do that, and that's a double standard, and when I do it, it's a big problem, but when you do it, I don't get mad. I'm like, of course, because in that moment, I'm triggered, and I don't care. I don't care that it's a double standard. I don't care what you want, because right in that moment, I'm completely in tune only with the ways that I hurt. It doesn't matter. And so but now, when I get into a place like that, I identify that I am not fit for human consumption at that point. I need to not have this discussion. I need to let them have their anger and let them have their experience towards me, and realize that this is a rain cloud that's going to pass, and it's going to be okay soon.
Exactly.
As long as you don't make it worse.
Exactly. And I think, too, that anger gets a bad rap in a relationship.
Good point.
I try to tell my clients, I'm like, anger is a good thing because it's alerting you to what's not going right. It's just what you do with it that's either good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so, preparing clients to know there's going to be times where you're so angry at this person and you want to give up and you don't want to be around them. Right. And that's okay. Keep moving on.
Right. It means you're human. That's normal. It's really not a healthy couple that doesn't have any attunement with their own emotional experience and just stuffs it all the time and stays at a 5 out of 10 constantly. Like that's a different kind of unhealth. But so yeah, I mean, get help too. I mean, if you're in a relationship that's not going well, get help. And if the other person refuses to go to counseling, that says a lot. What we say we believe, what we say we want, is much, much less authoritative than what we actually do.
Well, and that I end up saying this to a lot of people too, because a lot of couples therapy, as I said, starts with just one person, and there for a long time there was this statistic, and there still is, that marital therapy or marriage counseling is frequently unsuccessful, and a lot of that is because there's a lot of ineffective marriage therapy out there. And a lot of that is because couples come in, usually because things have been going very poorly for one person. And when they come in, or when a breakup happens and someone comes in and they say, oh my gosh, I'm blindsided. Everything was going so well. and usually things were going well for that person. The other person, on the other hand, was saying for a long time, you're drinking too much, you're philandering too much, you're too distant, you're working too much, whatever it is, and the person, it's whatever, and things are going to keep going well for them. They can put it off indefinitely until the other person leaves. And so what'll happen a lot of times is a grieved partner will pack their bags and they'll be on their way out. And then, the partner for who things were going well will come in and be like, what's happening? Okay, now we can go get counseling. And that's the point at which I get a lot of couples.
Right. That's a form of a boundary where someone has said, enough's enough. And that's another point that I wanted to make, is that one of the things you can do is begin to set reasonable boundaries. You might need some help and training, and this is where individual counseling is handy if you can get some input from a professional on how to say that you're not comfortable with something in loving, kind terms, or how to negotiate without tearing each other's eyes out. Things like that, where you can, this is the other thing, is if you get healthy, if you begin to really get emotionally healthy and engage in much more sound relationship principles, the other person their hand is then forced. They either have to come alongside and get healthy too, or they got to go. Because healthy means boundaries, which means I'm not going to do things this way anymore. I'm not going to tolerate that. If you would like to do that, fine. But if you do that, that means I'm going to do this.
And that's the difference between an ultimatum and a boundary, right? Mm-hmm. An ultimatum is, you do this, I need you to do this, or else. And a boundary is, if you do this, I'm going to have to do this.
Right, exactly. Good point, good clarification. Yeah, it's sort of like, if you come home drunk, yet again, I'm going to need you to stay elsewhere, or I'm going to have to leave, or whatever. I mean, that's an extreme example, or that kind of thing. But so yeah, just there's no quick way out of these things, and there's no easy fix. And you mentioned, when we get people in marriage counseling, oftentimes it's like it's too late or something, or they're so deep in a hole that it's almost hopeless. And sometimes people come in, they just want permission to be done. That's what they want. They just want some professional to tell them, like TKO everybody. And that's fine. We do that for people. I wish, though, people would come in for maintenance sessions, like when things are just getting a little rough. Like, let's just go in and touch base with a professional. Maybe every 3 months, maybe every 6 months.
And there's a stigma too, I think. And I've talked to people in my personal and professional life, and you'll suggest that, and they'll be, well, nothing's wrong. My marriage is okay.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is an interesting thing, because if it was your physical health, most people who have a lick of sense go in and they, just to make sure that everything is okay, they'll get checked out. People don't do that with relationships, and a relationship is a pretty difficult thing to maintain, isn't it? I mean,
it is. It takes a lot of work, and so that begs the question: why do we do it at all? Why do we humans do this? What do we get out of it, though? Let's talk about the positives. What can a relationship be for someone?
I think, obviously at a very elementary level, it's companionship, but it's also somebody who, in a very healthy sense, will help you grow, will push you to grow, as long as you're both on the same page of doing that. And it's, a different kind of connection than what you can have with anyone else, as long as it's done in a way that, obviously is appropriate and healthy. I think, we all want that, but
right.
As long as, like you said, we're realistic about it, because I think, up until now, the conversation about relationships hasn't been like we said, realistic one.
What's your take, Ian? I mean, what does your marriage do for you? What do you like about it?
Well, it's interesting, because there's attachment, of course, and that whole attachment theory, and that's wonderful. And I think about it too from a pragmatic standpoint. You think about it, and you can have really strong, intense relationships with, say, friends, but the romantic dyad is the most common, frequent form of intense relationship that we have in most societies. And so if that's not the relationship that you have that's meeting your primary needs, what you're going to run up against is, like, let's say I'm good friends with you or whoever, and you're about to get married, right?
Yeah.
And so if you and I are hanging out and we're bowling every Saturday night, or we're trap shooting, or whatever it is we're doing, at some point your romantic relationship is necessarily going to have to take precedence, because it's meeting more of your needs, and it's meeting them in a more kind of immediate and intense way.
Yeah.
And so not having one of those puts you in a position, to some extent, of vulnerability, because when you have those relationships with other people, then they're subject to entering those relationships, and you're going to find yourself looking for a relationship that may be unsustainable, because the other person is going to move on to the more intense type of relationship. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
And that just totally made it sound like I was with my wife, because my friends stopped, bowling with me. But that's not it. I mean, that's not the primary reason. But I think there is a reason in our society that you're pushed, and I don't mean in a bad way, but that's the relationship that fits how to get your needs met. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it ought to. It ought to be a priority for you. It's theoretically the most important relationship in your life, and you got to maintain it. You got to give it time, and if your social relationships are more important, then I don't think you can expect your primary romantic relationship to succeed.
Because then you're just flipping it. You're flipping the script on your romantic partner, right? And you're making your other relationships more important, and they're going to get their needs met somewhere else.
Right. And I was thinking about what do I like about a relationship? I like. Shelley's is my fiance, and I like who I am when I'm around her. There's something about being around this person that makes me better. She does show me my blind spots in a way that's really safe for me, which allows me to grow and become a healthier, more joyful, contented, a functional person. there is the companionship piece. We enjoy a lot of the same activities, and we just can while away the hours together. And it's a really great, beautiful, lovely thing, especially, these cold fall October days, and it's kind of bright out and chilly, and you're like, all right, let's make soup and start a fire. And it's just, there's nothing I'd rather be doing. It's just so deeply satisfying. And then to be really known by somebody, that your deepest parts that even you don't fully understand, and know that as you discover those throughout the course of your life, that you can reveal those to someone who's gonna hold those things and hold them gently and not use them against you, and allow you to have your process. And this reciprocal exchange where there's some deep, deep trust involved is it's really hard to beat,
That and the ability just to sit with someone in silence.
Yeah, that's important, especially if you're an introvert.
Yeah.
I tell people, like, if you get in the car with me and I don't talk, that doesn't mean I don't like you. It means I'm an introvert. Turn on the radio and leave me alone. But, you're right. Sitting in silence with somebody.
Well, yeah, because, I think for so many other people, we feel like we have to be on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that, like you talked about, that, like that person knowing your deepest self, the parts of you that maybe you don't even like. And there's that unspoken ability to, we're communicating, but we're not communicating right now in the traditional sense.
And that does make me think of something with these volatile relationships, because even in those moments happen sometimes, where that a good portion of the time, this is bad for me, but there are those moments that do feel really human and connected and loving and deep. It's just that they're so overshadowed by pathology, and that can make it really confusing, because when you do choose to end a relationship like that, you do sometimes walk away from some of that too, and you've just gotten to a place where you have to make that decision. Does the pain of this interaction outweigh in importance the positives in this relationship?
Sure, and I think, hearing you talk about it, Marty, I think that's the defining difference between the relationship I'm in now versus the relationships I was in previously, where there's an element of safety to that, like you said, where, in those volatile relationships, of course, you had those moments where you're sharing those deep parts of yourself. You have that familiarity. Of course, you're going to develop that with somebody that you spend time with, but knowing that those parts of you that are difficult or that you're not always comfortable with won't be used against you in the moments where it's not safe, where it's not comfortable, where it's not happy. And I think that's one of the big differences that I've seen with relationships.
Yeah, you're right. Trust is not something we've identified, but we've been talking about the whole time. Not just not cheating on me, but trusting that the other person will accept me.
That you can give them access to your emotions and not be hurt.
Right.
Have you ever seen a relationship where a volatile relationship where there is a moment of human connection or of true emotional intimacy, and that actually ends or the relationship or causes problems because that's not the script in the relationship and it scares somebody?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Give me an example.
I'm thinking of a lot of cases. I'll have a volatile couple come in, and somebody will give someone access to their emotions, or they'll offer them something that's very intimate. And the other person, either because they don't know or usually because they don't know how to respond to that, they'll kind of stomp on it.
Well, yeah, and that's true. There's an appropriate time to begin to share more deeply, and that's a mark of certain personality pathology. Is that when somebody does go too deep too fast, that is a sign of trouble, actually. And that's why it's advisable to go on some dates and get to know each other slowly. And that's a much more healthy way to start a relationship, as opposed to, crawling to bed on the first date and then moving in a month and all that. That's just not, you're not allowing the process. And that's driven by, desperate needs to be with somebody, to not be alone and such.
Well, and I think too, touching on something that you both were talking about, I think that's you being responsible getting into a relationship, though, knowing what it is that you deep down internally expect out of this relationship. Because if you go into it with the expectation that I'm going to date this person forever, but I don't want to ever hit that level of that shared intimacy, that actual back and forth connection. Because I've seen it in my own relationships and with, friends, clients, where they may have been dating for 2 or 3 years, and one partner is always seeking that connection, that deeper commitment. When there's finally that brief moment of it, or that they hit that point, the other partner gets scared because that's not ever what they wanted out of the relationship.
Right.
Well, and I think the best. Have you ever read Cupid's Arrow?
No, I haven't.
It's a book. Daniel Sternberg, I think, wrote it, and he talks about relationships as a triangle. And there's 3 sides of the triangle. There's passion, there's intimacy, and commitment. And over the course of the relationship, each side, it changes shape. The sides will get larger and they'll get smaller, but there's always some. And sometimes the triangle can be different for each person in the relationship. And I think if the triangles get too disparate, that can end a relationship or can cause serious problems. And like you were saying, if somebody comes home and they say, hey, let's go ring shopping, and that you're not even close to being at ring shopping, that's a huge problem. And there's also the idea, I think, in relationships, and we've talked about it before, the idea of a lot of people might see a relationship as a commitment. Like if the 3 of us go bowling and you're there because you just want to have fun and do some bowling, and Kate is like, oh, I'm going to get in good with these guys, and then later I'm going to ask Marty for a kidney, or whatever it might be. If you're seeing it if you're seeing the time spent as an investment or as something that you're working towards, that's really gonna hit you hard when that goes away, because you're gonna see it as a loss rather than moving away from something that was of continual benefit while you were doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think so. You have to be willing to sacrifice your own agenda and put somebody else's agenda first. Not in the codependent way where you always put other people's needs first and you're a caregiver and you're giving to get and you're making yourself indispensable to someone so they don't reject. That's not what I mean. But you have to be willing to put aside things that are important to you at times and give yourself to somebody in a way that shows them that you're really dedicated and committed to the relationship. And that's what is love? Love is behaviors that show deep dedication and commitment to the well-being of someone else over and above your own. That's what it is, in my estimation, after having tried and failed and tried again. So your thoughts on that? What is love?
I would agree with that, Marty, with the, incorporating what's important to that person while balancing what's important to you, and finding a shared happiness, a shared goal, if you will. And I think part of what scares people off from making that plunge is, as they look at going into a relationship, they look at what's important to them in this moment. And they know that they're going to have to give some of that up. And they're very much like, I could never give that up. I don't want to give up those parts of myself. I'm not going to get into a relationship where people aren't giving themselves the permission to change, that they what's important to them today may not be what's important to them 6 months down the road,
right,
or a year down the road. And so
that's the investment piece where you get payoff. Those things you give up by entering into a relationship, they pay back to you tenfold over time.
Absolutely. And so I think what love comes down to is knowing that you're going to see somebody at their worst. They're going to see you at your worst. You're still going to have faith that it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And that you keep coming back. You keep making that commitment. You keep investing in that work. And it's not I'm going to commit to that work today. I'm going to commit to this change today and never revisit it.
That's well said, Kate. I don't know, Ian, what's your take? What's love to you?
I think it is a lot of different things at a lot of different moments. Sometimes love for me is, in my own relationship, with Rachel, sometimes it's, if she's not feeling well, and I can offer to take the kids, or I can do whatever, or I unload the dishwasher. That's a whole different thing, and sometimes I'm not in a position to do that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if she's accepting of me saying, well, I don't like this job. I can't do this job anymore. And I remember we had this conversation once, and she said to me, well, I mean, if you can't handle it, then you get another job.
Right.
And we'll figure something out.
I'll take that risk with you.
Right, exactly. If we have to sell the house, I'll do without so that you're not unhappy at your job. And that's a different thing, and that's different than, hey, let's go have dinner, and then we'll come home and watch Netflix in our pajamas, and we'll be comfortable with each other. So I think love is a different thing. It meets your needs in a different way from minute to minute.
Sure. And I think it's also just finding that person that you're okay knowing it's never always going to be 50-50.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. This whole notion of fairness has just got to go right out the window immediately, please.
Well, even the best relationship is only going to, as you'd said, it's only going to meet your needs part of the time. I don't think there's any relationship where and not a healthy relationship where somebody's had their needs met by another person 100% of the time.
Right.
I mean, there are things in my life that my marriage is great and meets my needs, and a therapeutic conversation, because my wife's a teacher, not a therapist, that's not going to meet my needs in that way.
Right. No, that's to be expected, and that's okay. I just was reminded of this quote that somebody sent me a while back. It's by somebody named Sherman Alexie. It was, he loved her, of course, but better than that, he chose her. Day after day, choice. That was the thing. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen.
Well, there you have it. There's part 3 of our relationship series with Ian Kearns and Kate Bell. We hope it's been enjoyable to you and helpful as well. Please come back for more episodes of the Heartache Connoisseur podcast, where we explore multiple topics around issues of emotional health, growth, spirituality, and anything else that seems interesting. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to check us out at theheartacheconnoisseur.com. Subscribe to us on all of the normal social media outlets, and have a great day. Thanks for listening. Deep inside, I feel a wind hits me.